right, guys. Hey, welcome to another episode of the Coach's Corner. All right, so for those of you in the program, we're going to talk about something that's come up quite a bit in the activities that you've been working on. So I think it's something that we probably should address. It's what I'm noticing kind of across the board with the participants in this cohort. And that's about trauma reenactment. And why do we repeat, the stuff that actually hurt us? So here's my opening question that I want you to consider. And have you ever asked yourself, why do I sometimes find myself pulled towards situations, toward people, or behaviors that look very much like the abuse that I went through? And why would I repeat something that's so painful? So let me share you the story, kind of starting out with someone that I work with, Carlos. Carlos was around 36 years old. And so when he came to me with this real heavy shame. Now, we've talked about the shame before, but I remember he said to me, he's like, yo, coach, I hate myself for this. I end up in these situations where I just replay my abuse. I let people hurt me, abuse me, and sometimes I even act out the same things that were done to me. And then afterwards, I just feel disgusted and I feel broken. It's like, man, why do I do this? All right, well, Carlos isn't alone, right? And so many of us as survivors, we feel this pull. We don't want it, yet the compulsion is actually real. And it isn't about being weak or isn't about wanting abuse. It's the brain trying to process a story that was never told. All right, so here's our reflection pause that I want you to think about. So, have you ever caught yourself moving towards something you knew would hurt you, but you didn't fully understand why? All right, guys, here comes our neuroscience, right? So, why is this happening? What's the brain's logic? What is actually going on? All right, there's several things that I can think of. The first one I'm going to call unfinished story. So trauma is actually like a story that's stuck on the same page. And so the brain keeps returning, trying to actually finish it. And so reenactment, sometimes it's an unconscious attempt to actually master what was once overwhelming. So that's the first thing that I think of when I think about trauma reenactment. There's just this unfinished story. The second thing, which I think as survivors we're all trying to find, is the search for control. Because as a child, we didn't have control. Like there was someone that was actually controlling us, controlling our body. And there's this constant, I'm going to say, strive and longing for control. So sometimes reenactment can actually be the brain's way of saying, you know what? If I play it out again, maybe this time I'll have the control. And even when it doesn't work, right, that pull still remains. All right. So what's another one we think about reenactment? I'm going to say sometimes it's the younger self's voice. So inside, I'm going to say that the younger part of you may still long to be seen, to be heard, or to be rescued. And so then the reenactment works as, I'm going to say, a misguided attempt, right? To give that little child, to give that little boy what he never got. Okay, that voice. And then the last one I think is just it's simple, I'm going to say neurobiology of urges, right? We've talked about the amygdala so many times, but the amygdala, so we've got our fear, the emotional center there. And then we've got the dopamine system kind of mixed up with that. So our reward and soothing, they collide. And so the body remembers pain and the physical responses of arousal. And so survivors, sometimes what happens is we actually confuse the two. So we've got safety plus arousal plus shame, and it's all tangled, jumbled up in this big ball of chaos. Now, this doesn't mean that you wanted what happened to you. It means that your brain learned a confusing survival script. All right. At Coach's Corner, we always talk about what are some practical strategies. So for those of you that are part of the program, here are some strategies that maybe we can do and help us in breaking the reenactment cycle. All right, we always know the first one, right? I'm going to tell you because we always say we got to name it without shame. Okay. So the first step is courage to say to yourself, you know what? This urge is a trauma replay. This is not who I am. Even just by saying those words, that the urge is trauma replay. So I'm acknowledging what it really is, and this is not who I am. And the reason this has been working, I'm going to say, at least for the clients that I've been working with, is because naming actually separates you from the compulsion. And so that shame piece starts to actually lose some of its grip on you. So, all right, this guy's for this week. For this one, this is what I want you to try. I want you to write down that sentence, right? Reenactment is my brain's way of trying to finish an old story. And what I want you to do is I want you to read it whatever when that urge to reenact actually arises, right? We're just trying to throw some wrenches in here. The next thing I think you can do, and let me get some water because my throat is drying out here. The second thing I'm going to say that we're going to do for a strategy is we're going to map our triggers, just like we talked about in the last coaching session. Notice what situations, notice what feelings or thoughts are actually sparking the reenactment. Maybe it's loneliness. Maybe you notice you want to reenact whenever there's stress. Or you notice maybe you have a couple of drinks and wow, things started popping up. Or maybe it's even certain people. Okay. Now, when we talk about triggers, triggers are actually predictable once you actually start looking for them because it's awareness. And awareness actually equals power. So if you're going to try this one for this week, this is what I want you to do. For 1 week, I just want you to track your movement. When you felt pulled to actually reenact, what you're going to do is you're just going to write down 1 or 2 words about what's happening, like before the urge, right? Because remember, we're trying to throw a wrench in, but we got to know, okay, what's the pattern? What's coming before? What's the ritual? And so that's the thing we have to do. Another thing that we can actually do or try, we can actually create a pause and actually redirect the plan. So when the urge hits, right, we're going to pause for 10 minutes. We're going to do one of our grounding actions like walk, push-ups, cold water on the face, whatever it is that's going to give us that 10-minute pause. Now, for some you guys, it's longer. And you guys already know in this program, if it lasts for a certain amount of time, then you need to text me, right? That's part of the program. You need to text me. Because then sometimes what happens is when you have a chance and we're sitting there and we're talking about, the urge actually leaves, right? So we're redirecting into something that engages both your body and your brain. Maybe you need to call a safe friend. Maybe you need to journal. Maybe you need to get up and move, but you got to try one of those strategies. And oftentimes the reason it works is because urges, they have peaks to them, just like a wave. Think about a wave and the crest and it gets to a whoosh and then it comes back down. Urges are like that too. And so when we have the delay for that wave or that urge and redirection, it's actually going to help you to ride it until it actually passes. Now, the last one we talked about this younger self voice, but we've got to give our younger self actually the voice now. So instead of replaying the abuse through action, why don't we let that younger part of us actually speak safely? Maybe write a letter from that younger self, from your younger self, or maybe speak it aloud. You know what? I needed someone to see me. I needed safety. What you're doing is you're giving expression without reenactment. See, sometimes we're allowing, I'm going to say, the body to speak in ways that aren't good, as opposed to speaking it and acknowledging it ourselves. And this is where our story actually begins and starts to resolve. All right, so Carlos, right? So when I worked with Carlos, what did we do? First with Carlos, we started by naming the urges as trauma replay. And so he stopped calling himself disgusting and all the other different type of names that he had. And he started saying, you know what? This is my brain trying to finish an old story. Then what we did, we just had him to start tracking his triggers. And he noticed that they hit hardest after the fights with his partner, in which then he felt like he was lonely. Okay. And so what he did was he created a pause plan. And so when that urge hit, when he went, whatever, he would go for a late night run, or sometimes he would actually text me or call, and sometimes whatever we have a talk, or he'd start journaling. And maybe he'd start journaling letters, whatever, to his younger self. And what we notice is over time, right, it's the pull that he had from the reenactment started to actually weaken. Didn't totally vanish right away. Now, eventually did, but it weakened it. And that's what we're trying to do. So, but for the first time, Carlos actually felt that he had choice. And to me, that's what's important. All right, guys. So in Coach's Corner here, our reflection pause. So what would it feel like for you to face reenactment, not with shame, but with understanding and a plan? So where is this coming from? Oh, okay. I know where this is coming from. And now you've got a plan actually in place. You've got your strategies. Now remember, if this reenactment is just causing our lives to be dysfunctional, it is involving some very, I'm gonna say, risky behaviors, sexual behavior, we got to get the support, right? And so whatever, maybe we got to do some more therapy for some of us so we can untangle those different parts so we can write better scripts. Maybe we need an accountability group, right, to provide support when the urges feel like they're overwhelming, right? That's one of the cool things about this program is that we have accountability there. Or maybe there's just some things. Maybe we really are experiencing something that's tied to depression or anxiety, and we need some psychiatric support, or we need some medical support. Here's the thing, reenactment is not destiny, okay? And with help, the cycle actually can be broken. All right, guys, I've spoken to you long enough. I know I try to usually keep these to 10 minutes, but sometimes the stuff inside of me just got to come out and I got to share it with you. So, guys, reenactment, we know, is one of the most painful struggles because it makes you feel like you're betraying yourself. And so many of us have been there. But I want you to hear me. This is not proof that you're broken. This is proof that your brain is trying clumsily and painfully to actually resolve the unresolved. So you don't have to finish that story through repetition, but you can finish it through healing, by naming, by mapping, by pausing, and letting the younger you finally speak. So give yourself what was denied: safety and choice. All right, guys, so this is our challenge for the week. When that urge arises to reenact, can you pause and ask, hey, what part of my story is trying to speak right now? Write it down. That's the beginning. That's the beginning of breaking the cycle. All right, guys, there we go. Okay, so I've been going over your activities, and there's some other questions that are coming up. So next week in Coach's Corner, we're going to hit the whole sexual identity confusion piece, right? And how abuse can distort the templates that we use actually for connection, and how you can actually reclaim it to be truly yours. All right, guys, until then, keep showing up for yourself.